All right. It looks like we are live. Hi, everybody. Happy Friday. Welcome to our Friday, May 23rd, FinCrime Friday chat. My name is Clayton Norman. I am the social media marketing manager for Serify, which is the parent company of ACFCS. I'm going to be your host today. And we got a great topic today. Today, we're going to be having a FinCrime Friday chat on OSINT, or using open source intelligence. And this is going to be a great primer for our upcoming OSINT workshop that's going to be coming up next month. We're going to share the details for that. We'll have a link to that in the comments. You can also find that on our events page. As usual, if you are tuning in, we are excited to have you here. This is our monthly get-together where we talk about news, interesting topics, anything that could be of value to you as a financial crime and compliance professional. If you are not already an ACFCS member, fix that. Head over to acfcs.org. Enroll today, become a member. That gets you access to our exclusive events. It gets you access to hundreds of hours of training. I know Aaron and Brian have both been working on some new and updated trainings, so hopefully we can share a little bit about that maybe at the end of the conversation here, because that's some pretty exciting stuff that we've got going on. Also, it gets you access to events like our Web3 and Crypto Symposium that we just had earlier this month, upcoming workshops, like I mentioned, our OSINT workshop, and of course, FinCrime Virtual Week. Those are all events that are open to our members, plus all of the other great benefits that you get of being part of an incredible community of professionals who are dedicated to improving and enhancing their skills, knowledge, and abilities when it comes to identifying and preventing and mitigating financial crimes. If you are tuning in, we want to hear from you. So please, today during our conversation, first off, let us know where you're tuning in from. Love seeing all of the different cities and states and countries clicking up through our comments, and love to know that people are tuning in from all over the world to engage with us. Also, if you have questions, if you have comments, if you have insights that you would like to share, drop those in the comments, because we are going to be highlighting your comments on screen to show them off for everybody and helping further the conversation, because we really value that interaction that we have with you guys. So Aaron, Brian, how are we doing today?
Great. It's Friday.
It's Friday.
No better way to spend a Friday before a long weekend than talking about OSINT, right? So
Right.
yeah,
That's
that's exciting.
We made it. Going to go into a long weekend too. So also, if you're tuning in, let us know what you're doing for the Memorial Day weekend. Hopefully everybody's going to do something fun and enjoy themselves. So like we said, we're going to be talking about OSINT today. But before we get into that conversation, let's go through some recent headlines. Let's kick this one off. So this one is FATF. Brian, what is that? Financial
Asset Task Force, the good old FATF. Yeah.
All right. So FATF, Interpol, UNODC issue a call to action against financial crime. So May 2025, leaders from the Financial Action Task Force, Interpol, and the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, UNODC, convened in Vienna to call for urgent, coordinated global action against money laundering and terrorist financing. They say the emphasized need for enhanced international cooperation, improved asset recovery efforts, and the implementation of innovative tools like Interpol's Silver Notice to effectively combat the financial underpinnings of organized crime and terrorism. Okay, Brian, what's our take on this?
Yeah, our take on this is our old friend asset recovery here. We are big believers in asset recovery being an essential part of the financial crime landscape, and really a kind of underappreciated one, right? Like illicit financial flows, are estimated to be something like 4% of the total global economy. We're talking trillions of dollars. And if that money is not recovered, like trillions of dollars worth of illicit proceeds are flowing into criminal organizations, right? And we can catch bad guys, we can issue fines, we can arrest people. But at the end of the day, these are profit-making organizations. And if they're making a profit, they're going to continue to operate. So asset recovery is hugely important. And, this kind of high-level call, you might look at that from Interpol and FATF and be like, oh, yeah, cool. a bunch of guys in suits are telling us to fight financial crime. Great. But really what they're focusing on was asset recovery, like enhancing asset recovery. And you mentioned the silver notice. This is the first new Interpol notice in a while. Interpol issues these like color coded notices that ask for different measures to be taken by Interpol members, like police forces in different countries. And the silver notice is an asset recovery measure. It's to trace assets, identify assets of financial crime. And it's a new one that they're now employing to further this effort towards asset recovery. So asset recovery, huge part of the financial crime landscape. Something that not necessarily everybody deals with on a day-to-day basis. If you're at an FI, you might be more about identifying suspicious transactions, reporting, etc. But to the extent that we all play a role in fighting financial crime, I think we all need to become more asset recovery specialists too. Part of the CFCS certification, by the way. So I'll throw that plug in there to close that out.
Absolutely. Great place to learn more about that and really build up those skills. Awesome to see people tuning in. I see Ohio, Toronto, Tanya from Michigan, Jay from Vancouver, and Krishnam from India. Rick just tuned in from the DC chapter from Pennsylvania. Guys, thanks for tuning in. We love seeing you here. Keep letting us know where you're watching from. All right, our second headline. Brian, I think you're also going to take this one. So focus, fairness, and efficiency in the fight against white-collar crime. In a May 2025 memorandum, the U.S. Department of Justice's Criminal Division outlined its updated enforcement priorities for combating white-collar crime. Emphasizing a balanced approach, the memo highlights the need to focus on significant threats such as fraud in government programs and international money laundering, while avoiding overreach that could hinder legitimate business activities. This policy is guided by three core principles: focus, fairness, and efficiency. All right, Brian, what do you think?
Yeah, well, before I get into it, shout out to Rick Cadenas, longtime ACFCS member and DC chapter board member. So it's great to see him in the house, Rick. Thanks for joining. And he's an IRS guy too, so it's kind of relevant for the tax evasion discussion that we'll get into with this DOJ memo. So yeah, I mean, this was an interesting one. Acting head of the criminal division put this one out, and it definitely, as the memo itself says, emphasizes this balanced approach, right? And it's no surprise. There's a lot of discussion about a sort of deregulatory movement in the current administration. I think this shows both sides of that argument to some extent. Like some people might be in the industry might be going too far with the belief that there is like a deregulatory push, particularly in the financial crime arena. This memo reiterates a lot of the long-standing priorities against white-collar crime enforcement that have existed for a very long time. And the other thing it does is it adds a couple of new ones too. I think the big shift is a real emphasis on national security and combating transnational organized crime. That's not necessarily new, but it's just even more in terms of priorities. There's even more of it than there has been in the past. The other thing that I found interesting in here is tariff evasion. It mentions tariff evasion as a enforcement priority, and this is a new one that I don't think a lot of financial institutions necessarily currently have that much in place, right? It is a form of tax evasion. So to the extent that you can like leverage controls related to tax evasion, you should be considering it. But it's also kind of goes into like export controls and that arena too, which has been a big, area of conversation in the last couple of years. But I think, looking ahead, you are going to have to consider how you are developing controls for tariff evasion. And there are some indicators, that all I know is what I read in the papers, but there also are some indicators that there are already companies engaged in tariff evasion, right? They're using shells or they're using domestic firms claiming to be importing from a different place, et cetera. So that's a new risk area that I found interesting in the memo. But overall, I think, what it reiterates is that some things change. A lot of things don't change, especially in financial crime. Your program needs to be really robust. We are up against a lot of national security threats, and you can't assume that, you can let your guard down right now.
All right. Okay, I think this headline was from Newsweek. what the Genius Act means for crypto investments. The Genius Act, a bipartisan bill aimed at regulating stablecoins, has advanced in the US Senate with a 66-32 vote. The legislation seeks to establish a federal framework requiring stablecoin issuers to maintain one-to-one reserves in liquid assets and comply with anti-money laundering regulations. However, the bill has faced criticism from some Democrats, including Senator Elizabeth Warren, who expressed concerns over potential conflicts of interest due to former President Trump's family's involvement in cryptocurrency ventures. Aaron, this was yours. What are we thinking about the Genius Act?
I am excited for it because I'm really excited to see them meaning Congress, the U.S. Congress, the U.S. federal government, right now take part in this or take control, because right now, U.S. regulatory framework when it comes to crypto is kind of like Schrodinger's cat. It's there, but it's not. Just don't open the box. This cat's either alive or dead. There's so many agencies competing with each other to license and regulate crypto in all sorts of different ways and all different cooks in the kitchen that it is frustrating for those in the crypto world to say, oh, we're doing it this way. We're complying with AML principles this way because New York NYDFS says to do it this way. But then we also operate in Wyoming and they have a different state. And we also have a different charter and we have to deal with the SEC and the CFTC. And everyone has been kind of vying for their own turf on this. And I really believe, personal opinion, ACFCS hat off. It's my personal opinion that the Genius Act, which is guiding and establishing national innovation for U.S. Stablecoin Act, that sounds like SHIELD, is just the first in trying to figure out and help guide all these different agencies for regulation and guidance into who gets what in the crypto turf. And I think it's an exciting time. As far as the conflict of interest, I'm trying to read hard into different articles about what this means. So I like to learn what that means. I can't find what she means on that because the guidance itself, the act itself, is trying to make sure that stablecoins have everything as far as the countering financial terrorism, AML programs, everything, making sure everything is up to snuff and transparent. So I'm not sure where that conflict of interest is. Maybe I missed it. If anyone wants to comment on that without being incendiary, I'd like to learn. So I'm excited about it. It's just first of many.
So a good first step, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, and this still has to head to the House too, so it's a little bit TBD whether it's very likely at this point to pass the Senate. They still have amendments to do on it, and then it heads to the House where God knows what will happen.
And they probably won't even talk about it or even look at it until after the recess, at least this Memorial Day, all that good stuff. So who knows?
Yeah, so a little bit of a TBD there, but it is good. And regulatory certainty, if anybody tuned into the crypto symposium, is like really necessary for the industry. So moving in the right direction.
Well, maybe we'll have an update next month on that bill potentially. And certainly, as Brian mentioned, if you wanted to be abreast of these types of issues, you absolutely missed out on a great opportunity during the Web3 and crypto symposium earlier this month. But I know we're going to have a bunch of other great programming throughout the year that focuses on these types of issues. You can find that kind of stuff at acfcs.org/upcoming events. There's the link right there. All right, final headline here. So this one comes from Tech Radar. RICO investigation leads to 12 arrests in a $263 million crypto fraud. U.S. Department of Justice investigation has resulted in the arrest of 12 individuals involved in a racketeering conspiracy that stole over $263 million through cyber-enabled cryptocurrency fraud. The group employed tactics such as hacking, social engineering, and complex laundering methods to obscure the origins of the stolen funds. And I just wanted to pull out a quote from the article, a direct quote that talked about some of the methods they used. So targeters identified, organized, and collated information across various databases to determine the most valuable targets. The group would then cold call victims and use social engineering tactics to convince them that their accounts had fallen victim to cyber attacks and that they needed to hand over and that they needed to recover or secure their accounts, encouraging to hand over the credentials to those accounts to facilitate the recovery. This one sounds pretty wild. Brian, what do you think?
Yeah, this was a really interesting case. If anyone remembers, there was a pretty well publicized story last year about a guy in D.C. Who lost $230 million worth of Bitcoin in a heist, and that's these guys that are getting indicted now who are behind it, and that was most of their total figure that they stole. There were a couple other victims, but it was a sophisticated and well kind of planned social engineering attack where they convinced this person that their wallet was unsafe. They needed to transfer their funds, and then obviously they transferred it to a wallet under the control of these financial criminals. What it shows is that OSINT is not limited to the investigative side for the good actors. The bad actors use OSINT probably better than we do most of the time. And they had very sophisticated, I don't know about very sophisticated, but they had sophisticated people who were doing this. And they had a sort of, division of labor involved where there were people who were responsible for scouting, investigating the targets, that type of thing. And this has been a big challenge in the crypto space in general. And it's really kind of crossing borders too. It's not just in the US, we've seen it in Asia. There's been a couple of really high profile kidnappings of crypto investors in France and in Toronto. And so, they're definitely using open source intelligence in not just blockchain analytics, but researching on LinkedIn, researching on social media, et cetera, to find and target these individuals. And so, it's incumbent upon us to learn the tactics and techniques, not just to further our own investigations, but also to be aware of what is out there and what a determined individual can use against, anyone really with the power of OSINT.
Cuts both ways. Be careful what you post. Think before you post, I think is what they say in the schools now to head off cyberbullying. So I think that can apply here too. Great to see Wasim from Pakistan joining us. Wasim's super engaged. It's always great to see him and his great comments. So glad you're here. Again, if you're just tuning in, we are here for our FinCrime Friday chat on OSINT. We would love to keep seeing all of the great locations that people are tuning in from. We're about to jump into the conversation on OSINT. So if you have questions, if you have comments, anything that would add to the conversation, please make sure to share those in the comments.
Yeah, and one thing I'll challenge the audience on is if anybody's out there doing these investigations and they have any good tools, just throw them in the chat. Love to see the tools, the links, the site references. Like, one of the super cool things about it is, like, there's no barrier to entry here, right? Like you can go out there and learn and find things. And anytime we do one of these presentations, people jump in the chat and they're like, "Oh, I'm using this site," or, "Oh, I found this collection of resources. Oh, have you heard of this tool?" And it's like, "No, I haven't. This is amazing." So bring it in, drop it in the chat. Would love to hear from you.
Yeah.
I actually pull the chat records when people do that after our webinars because I can't get to them because I'm either moderating or doing whatever. And then I go, "Oh, what was that?" And I can pull them. So I'm able to get to them afterwards.
Just goes to show the value of this incredible community and everybody sharing learnings and helping upskill and level each other up. So, all right. So in today's digital landscape, open source intelligence, or OSINT, has become an indispensable tool for financial crime compliance professionals. By systematically collecting and analyzing publicly available information such as news articles, social media posts, corporate records, and online databases, OSINT enables investigators to uncover hidden risks, map suspicious networks, and respond proactively to emerging threats. This approach enhances traditional compliance measures like Know Your Customers, KYC, and anti-money laundering, or AML processes, by providing deeper insights into client behaviors and affiliations. For instance, OSINT can reveal undisclosed beneficial ownership structures or connections to sanctioned entities, which might not be apparent through conventional data sources. As financial crimes become more sophisticated, integrating OSINT into compliance strategies is crucial. Professionals equipped with OSINT skills can better identify, prevent, and mitigate illicit activities, ensuring their organizations remain resilient against evolving threats. So, Aaron, I know you wanted to take this one. Let's just level set a little bit. And can you define OSINT and the significance of its context in financial crime compliance.
Absolutely. Thanks for that opening, Clayton. So OSINT is an intelligence, right? It's open source intelligence. And the significance of it is it cannot be undersold. So I'm going to start with the Director of National Intelligence on their website. They have a definition for it. Intelligence derived exclusively from publicly or commercially available information that addresses significant, specific intelligence priorities, requirements, or gaps. So you can see right there, the DNI's website is front and center with that stuff. They know how important it is. They absolutely know that it needs to be done in intelligence collection for national security. So why couldn't it and why shouldn't it be for financial crime investigations, right? So the significance of it, you can do so much with it. You can verify your customer's identity, their beneficial ownership. You can flag PEPs. You can see if there's any sanctions exposure for your firm. FATF even calls it, or FATF calls for reliable, independent course. You have to actually use it. They need it for course, meaning you need to use this, right? You can surface allegations of fraud, corruption, trafficking. Lots of people can leave clues as far as you can find drug trafficking, human trafficking, labor, sex trafficking. They don't yet appear in law enforcement databases. You can find it before even law enforcement knows and tip them off. And when I was in the intelligence world, I was looking for folks like me doing and having my finger on the pulse of, say, financial transactions, FinInt, that sort of thing. You can open source intelligence. You can detect changes in your customer that your KYC reviews wouldn't normally pick up because you haven't done it yet. FinCEN guidance lists media searches as a normal part of your EDD and CDD. You can corroborate internal SAR data. Did you know that 97% of FIUs surveyed by Egmont use OSINT for precisely that reason alone, to corroborate what they already see in their SAR data? I thought that was a really cool tidbit. Fun fact. And you can find alternative spellings to different, either customers, to shell companies. You can find shipping routes, screening lists, and I could go on and on, but we don't have that much time left. But those are the quick things that I came up with as far as how important the context of OSINT is in your financial crime compliance investigations.
And so what types of publicly available information would be most valuable for this? What are we really looking for and where?
You're looking for everything, really. So this is a great time to live because, say, the last, 15 years or so, before that, we couldn't really find these things as easily and as readily available, right? It's a Google or Bing or DuckDuckGo search right there at your fingertips. But now we have everything from corporate and beneficial owner registries. You can find, as I mentioned before, the sanctions and watch lists. These are all publicly available, by the way. Court regulatory filings in your jurisdiction. That's something that you're going to have to go and find out on your own to say, what does my jurisdiction use? In the United States, excuse me, I have a PACER account. It's public, correct me if I'm wrong, public access to criminal electronic records. Oh, can't believe I got that right. PACER account. I've had that for years. And you can go in there and find court and regulatory filings. You can data leak information, like Panama Papers, what was the other one, big one for Panama, investigative journalism databases. You got mainstream media, you got niche media that you can find. Like you could pull some things that are blogs, but I'll get into later about how you should prioritize those because that can just be opinion. Be careful of that. You can find real estate and land registries, and don't forget blockchain analytics. That is open source because it's in the public ledger. If it's on the blockchain, it's a public ledger and could be considered OSINT. I believe it is. You can find trade or shipping information and internet infrastructure, like who is infrastructure? Who owns this particular domain? Who is it tied to? Nowadays, it's mostly companies like GoDaddy and stuff like that. And you won't find a whole lot, but you can dig deeper. And maybe you should come to our OSINT workshop on June 18th to find more about that. Shameless plug. Dark web forums, don't suggest those, but maybe try to find a third-party platform to do those for you. And satellite imagery, those are just awesome to be able to say, well, yeah, just Google Earth. You're looking at a particular address that your customer has, and it says 123 Anywhere Street in Topeka, Kansas, or whatever. And you look at it, and oh, that's a parking lot. How do they live there? So things like that really help when it comes to being able to find out who you're looking at.
Spent a ton of time when I worked as a reporter in the public records department down at local jurisdictions, going through court filings and um, property records, and it is incredible what you can find in those absolute gold mines of information. So, Aaron, how does? Well, I didn't want to cut you off. Looked like you were about to.
Oh, good. I went through a lot.
Yeah, I was just going to ask. So, how does using OSINT and gathering OSINT differ from traditional methods of intelligence for financial investigations?
So I mentioned before that, say 15 or 20 years ago, you'd have to do it the hard way. You get legal documentation, subpoenas, go down to the courthouse, pull documents, that sort of thing. And the main difference is how we get it. It means like you can have API pulls, you can have web scraping from third-party platforms. There's some third-party vendors out there that do an amazing job at scraping the web, open source and dark web types of information. You can have subscription data. There's no real legal gateway. That's a difference as well, other than maybe like a copyright issue or something. The collection is overt, or overt meaning we know what we're dealing with. We know what we're looking at. We can say who you used to work for. I got out of the agency and I became overt afterwards, and I could say who I worked for, not covert. There's a legal compulsion in traditional financial intelligence collections. It means that it requires a secrecy, such as like undertakings like MOUs. There's restricted distributions. You got to get your subpoena submitted to get those types of traditional financial intelligence collection methods. The data, like I said, how you get it, it's typically out there. It's social media, it's corporate registries. But with traditional financial intel collection, you're relying a lot on the banking transactions, and that comes with it a ton of legal processing. There's confidentiality issues you got to worry about. There's secrecy issues. You also have to worry about, there could be some classified human in there. You don't know about it. There's also a legal hurdle you have to get over. So another thing that you have to worry about is speed, or you don't have to worry about with OSINT, is speed and cost as well. So with OSINT, you got near time information at low cost, the price of your internet connection. With traditional, you have slower, it's expensive, it's bureaucratic. You don't even know if you're going to get an answer. And it's very time consuming. And the last thing I could think of is probably privacy. Privacy is the really one thing you got to worry about with privacy is you got to respect what GDPR, at least in Europe, CCPA regarding personal data, and traditional finance as well. Financial intelligence collection, though, it's often constrained by tipping off banks, such as like you can't talk about SAR, STR data, the confidentiality portion of it. So it's mainly how you get it and a very legal hurdle you got to go over, and everything else is cumbersome in the traditional sense.
Okay, so ease of access,
yeah,
and speed. That makes a lot of sense. Brian, we'll kick this one over to you. So, what are some practical ways that compliance professionals can start integrating OSINT into their existing workflows that are actually going to kind of fit within the structure of the work they're already doing?
Yeah, definitely. And for those that don't know, before I answer the question, Aaron, as you're probably able to tell, has a really extensive background in the intelligence space, on the government side first, and then in the private sector too, at financial institutions. So she really knows her stuff. And I didn't realize that Clayton is a little bit of an OSINT guy himself too. So I was a journalist too and spent some time digging into this public record, so I know the feeling. But yeah, we got a couple of OSINT experts on here. Pretty cool. In terms of where you can incorporate open source intelligence, there is a lot of parts of this job, right, as a financial crime professional, where OSINT is going to help. I think two of the obvious ones are in customer onboarding. A lot of people are already using it, and using it in ways that vary from the basic, which can still be helpful, to the sophisticated. I think a lot of people have like the dirt strings, right? And these are also used in the investigative context, where you take somebody's name plus money laundering plus fraud plus a bunch of terms and you search that, right? So, customer onboarding is a logical one to do some open source intelligence. Investigations, right, is the biggest one where you're going to use your open source intelligence as well. I think, a lot of this is going to be about identifying your objectives. One of the things that when we do presentations on this, people find really overwhelming about open source intelligence is just like the sheer quantity of data that you can find and the number of tools and resources and avenues for research at your disposal. So I think the first step of when you're considering when and how to use OSINT is just ask yourself, what's your goal? What's your objective? And then from there, what target data is going to help you achieve that goal? I want to confirm the risk profile of this potential corporate customer. Okay, so beneficial ownership information might be helpful for that purpose. So now you have a goal, you have some target data like name, address, et cetera, that you're either trying to gather or you're just trying to verify. So verification of information preferred or provided by a customer is another common area that you might want to employ some OSINT. But my biggest piece of advice, more so than like, hey, do it here, do it there, is think about your objective, and then think about the target data you're going to need to back up that objective.
I think that's super insightful. We've got a question from Wasim that I think we want to try to get out there. So Wasim asks, can we present evidence obtained through OSINT in court?
Yes.
There we go.
Depends on how, but yes, yeah, yeah. Depends on how it was obtained, right? If you took a screenshot of like a Facebook post, that's probably not going to meet evidentiary standards, right? If you are, but if you can verify it in some way, or use it as a way to get a court order to provide authentication, then yes. So it depends, and evidentiary standards in different countries are different, and in different types of cases are different. So we can't give you a blanket answer. It's a very lawyerly response. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm married to one. But you can generally, OSINT can generally help you to get something that could meet the evidentiary standards in court, if that makes any sense. So
the nice thing about, and I do agree, I'm not pushing back on you, Brian. The nice thing about what you said and the way I was coming at it is that we don't have to think like a lawyer. So when I said yes, absolutely, that goes in your supporting documents when you're writing your SAR or your STR. Attach it. And I'm just going to get into this here in a minute in the next question. Make any PDFs of what you've gathered that could either corroborate or deny the transaction monitoring that came in, what you're doing the case for, conducting the case for, or it is part of the larger picture of what you're submitting for your SAR or STR. And that's why I said yes, because lawyers then decide after that whether or not they're going to present it in court, because that's not our purview. We don't know whether or not it's going to be used in court. But if we give them the links that we're saving, that we're tagging, or give them the PDFs, it's up to them. That's why I said blanket yes, because I was coming from an FI perspective. But you're absolutely right, Brian. Yeah, it does depend.
Yeah, it's like I said, hard to give one response, because some evidentiary standards are different than others. But definitely as part of like the supporting structure, as you're saying, Aaron, OSINT is going to be valuable for a wide variety of court cases.
All right. Let's walk it back a little bit and let Erin put on her intelligence officer suit again, hat. I'm not sure, holster, whatever it is. And let's talk about frameworks and methodologies that can guide the effective use of OSINT in a financial investigation. And I think you hit on a lot of it right there in terms of the supporting documents, but how, when you look at it as a former intelligence officer, what are the frameworks or methodologies that you're viewing OSINT through?
The classic intelligence cycle. Classic. Have a plan and direction. And the thing I find funny about today's session, Brian, is that you and I didn't talk about what we're going to say and how we're going to go about it. You said earlier in the question before, you said, have a plan. And that's exactly the notes that I wrote down, is that have a plan, because that's the first thing you do in the intelligence cycle, especially when it comes to your investigation. At least have a plan and a direction. Define what you're going to look for. Like what you mentioned earlier, Brian, are you looking for beneficial ownership? Are you looking for source of funds? Are you looking for sanctions lists? Then you map out the likely OSINT sources you're going to go to. It's really going to help you save time as well. Are you looking at registries, leaks, the media, what kinds of media you're looking at? So that's really one. What are you doing and how are you doing it, right? Number two is then the collection. That's going to help map you where you're going to go. You use your corporate registries. You do all the things, social media, do any, if you can, darknet. It's not necessarily open, but it's thrown in there because I think it's worth at least looking at. Then you go on to your process or your exploiting of the information. You need to maybe either translate what you've got. You've got to tag the items, just like what I was talking before. You need to have your source and your date tagged, at least noted there in your SAR narrative. Save those PDFs and put them in your supporting documentation, because that's definitely what's going to help you either confirm or deny. That's what we used to say, deny all the time. But either confirm or deny either the transaction monitoring alert or the subpoena that came in, or whatever it is you're doing for your investigation. It could help you with that. And then you're going to analyze it. You're going to look at it and say, well, what am I actually really seeing here? You're going to apply analytical techniques to avoid confirmation bias. That's a big one I want to get across today. Avoid your confirmation bias. Just because you see headlines that you think are mirroring up to whatever political ideology you have, whatever social ideology you have, or anything like that, maybe do yourself a favor and go, well, is there something on the other side that speaks differently to this? And that's really good for brain games to use to say, I'm not just going to put something that supports what I think and believe. Make sure that it's fact-based. Make sure that there isn't bias in what you're putting in. That's really going to help you, and it's going to help your case. It's going to help your firm. It's going to help the lawyer present or not present something in court, like what Brian said. And then you're going to have dissemination. That is going to be the part where normally in the intelligence cycle in the government, that's you produce your intelligence report for Congress or whatever parliament that you're working under, you're serving. That this one's going to be your concise intelligence report for a SAR and STR, or an internal memo or a case file if you're working that way. And make sure that you store both the raw and the finished intel reports in a searchable system so you can reuse them. Again, if it does go to court, you're going to need to pull that back up in case something happens, the file gets corrupted, stuff like that. You've got it already there. So that is kind of I've changed the intelligence cycle as far as going after human sources into the financial investigation type of cycle that you should use.
Great. We've got another question that came in. So let's take a look at that one. How is the passing of the pending CIP rule for IRAs/ERAs going to help OSINT to be more valuable for investment advisors versus banks and other FINRA regulated financial institutions that already have to verify customer data? Or will this new rule not make much of a difference?
Brian, do you know this one?
Yeah, so this was part of the FinCEN proposed rule, or final rule. Call me out if I got that wrong, on registered investment advisors and exempt reporting advisors. So basically a class of, a large class of investment advisors, right, who now have more AML obligations than they did in the past. This has been like 20 years coming. I think FinCEN proposed this one like a million years ago, and they finally got around to it last year. And so, yeah, I mean, they now have much, a lot of them were doing this already. So I'll back up and I'll say it depends on the investment advisor, the size, the level of sophistication, right? Like a lot of them had pretty robust customer due diligence in place. Some, this is, a relatively new requirement in the sense that they are, going to be under the scope of more AML and financial crime regulation than they did before. So in terms of the value for these firms to now engage in some open source intelligence, I think it's inevitably going to be greater, right? Like they're going to have to know their customers in a stricter way than they have in the past. And they're going to need open source intelligence to do that. Just like a bank or a financial, not just like, but much like a bank or other type of financial institution would need to do. Now, I think for registered investment advisors, depending on what types of clients they're serving, this might be an easier process than some of the other financial institutions in the audience, right? Because they may have a more one-on-one relationship with the person. It may be a direct contact, like they have a client that they pick up the phone and talk to, So in terms of identifying that client, gathering the right documentation, knowing who they're serving, that should be a relatively straightforward process. If you're an investment advisor that's, serving whatever trusts and family offices and high net worth foreign individuals and other aspects, that's where it's going to get really dodgy, and you're now going to have to be doing a lot more digging and potentially employing OSINT in a way that you never have in the past, or turning to a firm or other third party to help you out with this. There's a lot of really good people in this space that do this type of work. So yeah, so that's what I would say about that one. Hopefully that's a helpful perspective. And yes, the final rule for RIAs was published last year, so good. I remember it.
All right. Nailed it. So guys, we're getting close to the end of our time here. But Aaron, I wanted to ask you, if you had any examples that you could use or share stories where OSINT, really significantly contributed to uncovering or preventing a financial crime.
Well, I'm not sure it prevented a financial crime is the story I was thinking about, but it definitely helped to kind of clear at least I believe, someone's name that came up in the transaction monitoring, weird, suspicious transaction monitoring. So try to make this as concise as I can. I was investigating for B of A, and a transaction alert came through of suspicious transactions, ATM withdrawals happening in a country in the Middle East. And the customer has runs a resort restaurant type in the United States. And he's the only person on the business and personal accounts. He and his wife are on the personal accounts. And I kept wondering why these cash withdrawals are coming out in a Middle Eastern country the night after a cash deposit. Oh my gosh, that would be a huge red flag, right? Anyone would probably just go, we're going to SAR this and maybe even possibly close down, because it was a higher risk, not the highest, but a higher risk Middle Eastern country. This doesn't make any sense. And I started looking at his Facebook page, and he is he seems very devoted and dedicated to this restaurant and to his family. Then I started looking on his wife's Facebook pages and her Instagram pages. She's completely devoted to her teenage daughters. Absolutely. Well, we all are, right? Even fraudsters can be. So I'm not saying that's the reason, but something started sort of bugging the back of my brain, that investigative mindset. And I said, well, would they really do something bad? Could they be terrorists? Could be. There's tons of family people who are terrorists as well. So I say on one side, this could be happening. And then I have to say to myself on the other, that's not just the sole reason. Then I found out how old the girls were, and due to social media. And I found out that one was college age and the other was late high school. And during the summer, they decided to go to this particular Middle Eastern country because guess what? They're from there. And that's what I learned. They're from there. They have family there, and they were visiting. And there was a class that the older girl was taking through American University, and she was just pulling money out because her dad was putting it in, and she needed it because she was there with her mom and her sister. And that was the reason. And I got a hold of an account manager and said, they need to put some people on their account and let them know that they have family that are going to be using that money. And we need to let the bank know, because we almost not tip them off that we almost shut them down, but try and get some kind of education to the customer to say, if you give us more information, they might not tell them this part, give us more information so that we're all golden. And then on the internal part, we say to each other, we might not have gone into a transaction monitoring alert because of that. But I like that story because it's more of a success story instead of a, hey, I found a terrorist sort of thing. I think some folks can do that. But I like bringing that one up because it shows that there are a lot of innocent folks, more innocent than not. Not everyone's a terrorist. I had to be told that when I was at B of A. My boss would say, downshift turbo, not everyone's a terrorist. And I like that story to tell you about that one.
Downshift turbo.
Yeah. Irene says, why out of the business account? They weren't educated. They didn't know. They didn't know. They should have taken it out of the personal account. I think it would have flagged anyway, considering the difference in locations in a higher risk country. But they weren't educated on which ones they should take out. They just had access to it. And I think obviously a college age girl is going to go, I have a card. I'm going to take money out. She doesn't know or care. So we needed to make sure that we got that information to them.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
I think that's a great story to your point earlier of like the skeptical mindset, right? And having the right mindset for a OSINT investigation. That's actually what someone dropped in the comments when I was asking about tools. They didn't give me a tool, but they gave me something better. They said the tool is an investigative mindset and know your sector and business. And that's like, your story right
That's a
there.
great one.
Yeah, that's like your tool is your brain and your ability to think critically about the situation, as you just illustrated. One thing I am concerned about in OSINT, and I've heard some people talk lately, is the potential for overuse of generative AI tools in the OSINT space, right? Like there's a lot of really cool use cases, article summary, for example. You're searching negative news, you find an article, it's really long, drop it in ChatGPT, ask for a summary, ask for a table with parties involved and links between them, right? Or writing up notes and asking for like, can you write a case summary report? ChatGPT will do that. What that streamlines your work, but what does that do to your mindset, right? Are you moving from someone who is out there searching, thinking critically, investigating, being skeptical, to just trusting what you're being given by a AI output? So it's a danger, it's both a tool and a danger. And I think on the OSINT side and the investigative side, you have to be really careful about balancing between speeding up your work, employing this for efficiency, and losing your best tool of your investigator's brain along the way.
It's a handshake. It should absolutely be a handshake, no matter what you're looking at, and to make sure there isn't bias in it too. Thanks for bringing that point up. But remember, eliminate that bias. I had to. Not everyone's a terrorist.
well, and you probably saved somebody, a pretty difficult, if not devastating, very uncomfortable situation of having their account potentially frozen, shut down for a little bit while they may need it, both for their daughters to have access to money too while they're abroad, which would be a bad situation for any parent to have their child cut off, but also for the operation of their business on a day-to-day basis that they were in there doing. So, yep. I mean, and it goes a step further, right? I don't think that we get to call stalking our ex's Facebook photos OSINT. This has to be in the context of a financial investigation, right? But I think that's a super powerful way of looking at it. So thank you for
disclaimer.
Right. So guys, everybody who tuned in, we are pretty much at time, even a little bit over time. Thank you so much for joining us for this FinCrime Friday chat. We're going to be back next month again on I know this Friday is not the final Friday of the month. Generally, we do them on the final Friday of each month. So June 27th, I believe. June 27th, we'll be back for a discussion about fentanyl and financial crimes. That's going to be a good one. We do not want you to miss that. Also coming up, we've got some incredible events. So June, what's the date on the OSINT workshop?
June 18th.
June 18th?
Mm-hmm.
June 18th coming up. Going to have our OSINT workshop with the great Larry Cameron, sharing his incredible insights and knowledge. So sign up for that. If you are not an ACFCS member, go ahead and become a member today, acfcs.org. Get all kinds of access to all of our tools, trainings, and events. You cannot beat the price for the value that you get from all of that training. Also coming up in August, it's not too early to go ahead and register for FinCrime Virtual Week. That's going to be August 11th through the 15th coming up. Going to be a great event. So please make sure that you are registered for that.
Can I add one more thing?
Absolutely.
We had a LinkedIn user just say, have a good Memorial Day weekend. And it reminded me to, when you're all out there, please, and if you see a veteran or someone wearing a veteran cap, or even someone who's in the active military, to thank our active military, thank our veterans, at least if you don't do it during the year, at least try to. Don't say happy Memorial Day, because Memorial Day is not happy for a lot of folks who've lost their friends, loved ones, family members. You're giving a really good expression, but thank you is a really good one. It's a much better one to say thank you, and a lot more appreciate it. Just giving a little tip on that one.
Yep. And we absolutely value the service and contributions of all of our veterans, and certainly the sacrifices of those that we've lost. So great reminder, Aaron. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Stay vigilant. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Clayton.
Thanks, everybody.